Hi, this is Tom Needham, and you are listening to Sounds, where personal stories, powerful art, and cultural history come together. I'm thrilled to welcome filmmaker Peter McDowell, the director of the moving and intimate documentary Jimmy in Saigon. The film traces Peter's search to understand the mysterious life and early death of his brother Jimmy, a Vietnam veteran who died there in 1972. What begins as a personal journey evolves into a profound meditation on family, memory, identity, and healing across generations and continents. I want to thank Peter for coming on the program. Great job, Peter.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah, this is an amazing film. Let's start at the beginning. What inspired you to finally start making Jimmy in Saigon after so many years?
Yeah, I mean, I was 5 years old when my brother died, and I knew that something was very sad in my family, but I kind of thought all families were sad. And then I grew up and realized that there was a lot that we were dealing with, or essentially not dealing with, that didn't happen in other families, at least other families, friends of mine who hadn't experienced the kind of loss that we had, losing the firstborn child and my oldest brother. So I think we all kind of packed it away. And throughout the course of my life, I got more and more interested in film. I made a couple short films in the 90s that did well. One of them was in multiple film festivals around the world. This was like a 7 minute long film. So I was encouraged about my filmmaking abilities. But at that time in the 90s, I didn't feel like I had the confidence to create a full length film. And I also really loved the quality of film itself. And I didn't love the way video looked in the 90s. I didn't like that grainy kind of cheap quality that video had. And so I kind of put it aside. And then in 2010, I started watching films that were shot on HD video, and I said, "My God, this looks like film." Like I was really like, this was around the time of what they call the democratization of filmmaking, when all of a sudden it became possible for average people with an HD camera and good sound equipment to create films, especially documentary films. And so in 2010, I used my last $2,000 to buy a used HD camera and sound equipment, and I started to interview everyone who ever knew my brother and try to walk in his footsteps. I was encouraged and spurred on by filmmakers I met in Brooklyn as I was, which is where I was living when I started the film, and also, yeah, friends and family members who encouraged me to go forward with it.
I really enjoyed the beginning of the movie. You said a moment ago that your family had a sadness to it when you were growing up, obviously because of what happened with your brother. But you said that you thought maybe all families or many families had a sadness. Can you just describe that a little bit? I thought that was really fascinating, and probably many people watching the film are curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know how people were going to react to the film until we started taking it on the road. And I was especially thrilled when I took it to Europe and we went to places like Italy and Greece and London and the Netherlands. And audience members would come up to me and they'd say, like, well, your story is just like ours. It's just like our country. Our families in our country also have family secrets. And so I realized there was something kind of universal about this story. And death is inevitable. Death happens to everybody, and it's in every family. And I think we've often swept it under the rug, and you sort of don't even think that anything like that could happen to anyone else. Like you think about your own story, but you can't imagine that it's also someone else's story. So, as I expanded my search and started talking with more people, I realized that this story, is a bit more of a universal story. Some families escape death for a long time, and but I think in our case we all had to deal with it, and In some ways, we didn't deal with it, and we suffered the consequences um, of not recognizing grief. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to sort of turn that around when I made the film.
I love personal documentaries. This one is very personal. But it's hard for a filmmaker to take that leap and think that people outside of my family and friends are going to find my story interesting. At what point did you know that this is the story that you wanted to make a feature film about?
Well, I think it was sharing the concept with people. I remember being at a film festival, a documentary film festival, with my friend Stephanie, and we were talking to people, and she said, "Oh, this is Peter. He's planning on making this movie." And people said, "Oh, what's the story?" And I would tell them, and every single person we talked to said, "Oh my God, that's so great. I want to see that. I'm so curious to know what happens." And my friend Stephanie turned to me and she said, "You know, when I tell people about my film ideas, they don't react that way, but like when you tell them about yours, they do react. They're really interested." And so I was really like encouraged by the enthusiasm that people had, and that's really what helped keep me going and know that the story was not just our family, but that other people would be interested as well. I'm also involved in a documentary film group called the D Word, which is international. And the D Word has, they do many things, but one thing they do is work in progress screenings for the members. So we did a screening where I showed a rough cut of the film to maybe 200 documentary filmmakers around the world. And we got feedback. This was in 2021, so it was about a year before the film was finished, and that was a seminal point for me because, you could either get a response from people like, I don't know, I wasn't really connecting, but everyone was very much connected and intrigued by the film. Of course, they had suggestions and comments, but so yeah, I was very encouraged.
One of the things that makes this film so powerful is when you give voice to the letters that your brother wrote. Tell our listeners
Mhm.
a little bit about the letters and how you incorporated them into the film.
Yeah, so when my brother died, my mom was quite a pack rat, and she saved every letter that he ever wrote to her. And then some of his other friends, especially his friend David, also saved letters. So I had this sort of treasure trove of hundreds of letters. That my brother wrote, and so we decided to incorporate those in the film. My brother John, my surviving one of my surviving brothers, um, he ended up reading them on camera for us, just audio recordings. So we have a member of the family reading letters from Jimmy, and we also show a lot of the letters physically in the film. And yeah, the letters, it's from his own, it's in his own words. So it's like the closest that we could get to interviewing Jimmy, which we couldn't do, is incorporating those letters.
And in case it's not super clear to the listeners, you mentioned that you would pitch the story to your friends and other filmmakers that you
Mhm.
knew. Your brother died, but there was a little bit of mystery as to what
Yes.
exactly happened, and that's what you really delve into in this into this into great depth in this film, right?
Yes. Yeah. My parents told me one thing and then I heard other things. And I heard a lot of, well, we don't talk about that, or that's too sad, or that's a topic that we don't want to talk about. And this is, I think, that comes to the core of like why this film resonates with other families is because every family has a few things that they don't talk about. And whether it's sexuality or drug use or death or some other issue, and bringing those undiscussed topics into the light is one of the important things. In fact, I mean, we can talk about the music later, but one of the things that I absolutely wanted to do in this film was involve not only music from the musical Hair, but also some scenes from the movie Hair, which end up showing up in the film. And I've always been really inspired by the film Let the Sunshine In,
Hmm.
and that film, that song. comes from a very dark time in history at the height of the Vietnam War, where the country was really grieving and really sad. But the anthem, the message in "Let the Sun Shine In" is like, let's not let darkness kill us or overshadow us. Let's try to like bring some light into the situation.
Yeah, I found that really fascinating the way you incorporated scenes and music from Hair. And I loved the original score as well. Not every filmmaker who makes a documentary really gives the attention to sound and music, I think, the way you have in this film. Um, it really kind of puts your film at a much higher level, I think, than a lot of documentaries. Um, Tell us a little bit about your incorporation of music into this film.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the most important collaborators with me on the film is my brother John. He's written soundtracks to dozens of films, including the Academy Award-winning documentary Born into Brothels, which won the Oscar for Best Documentary in 2004.
I love that
Um,
soundtrack.
so,
I
so
love that.
because
Yeah, it's so
go
good.
ahead.
Go on. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, because John had written that soundtrack and he's experienced with writing soundtracks. I turned to him right away and said, like, I really want you to do the soundtrack to this film. And he said, absolutely. And, he knew Jimmy a lot better than I did because um, John was, even though I was 5 when Jimmy died, John was 17. So he knew Jimmy really well. And but he agreed to write the soundtrack, and then we both agreed that it was important to involve some popular songs in the film as well. For those of you outside the film world, it's extremely expensive to involve popular songs in your film, but it was important for me to do that. So I raised the money. I raised all the money for the whole film myself. I raised $300,000 to make this film from donations, mostly from friends and family, um, so we licensed a few songs, and then the rest of the soundtrack, was written by my brother John, and he tried to incorporate some aspects of 60s and 70s music, but also give it its own unique flavor as a as a story, as a mystery, as a poignant story. So we worked on the soundtrack for a long time. It was one of the most sort of labor intensive aspects of the film.
I love how you travel around the world investigating this story. And when you do move from place to place, the music changes.
Hmm.
One of the pieces that I really particularly enjoyed was when you go to Vietnam.
Yes.
And you go there twice, and I noticed both times there's this music that comes on. Can you tell me about it? It has some choral aspects to it.
Yeah, so we did take a little bit of inspiration from a composer that I love, Steve Reich, and his music for 18 musicians. Um, we didn't really want to play that exact piece, but we wanted something that had like a similar feel to it. And Sabina Shuba, who collaborated with my brother on the film's music, she is best known for being the lead singer of the band, the Brazilian Girls, and she is an amazing vocalist, and all of that choral singing on those songs is her own voice just repeated. So she just recorded herself multiple times to create that choral feeling. But yes, I wanted something that was like bright and scintillating, and something that indicated um, like progress and um, joy and discovery. Yeah.
Well, when you travel in the film, one of the things that's always tough for a filmmaker is you just never know for sure what you're going to find or not find. It's risky.
Yeah.
So, what was it like for you to go to the places that you visit in the film and to have that pressure of really trying to find something that would be useful to you in telling your story in the documentary?
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking. I mean, the the first two trips I made abroad were to France and to Vietnam, and yeah, it was nerve-wracking. I didn't sleep at night worrying about it, and all I could say is, as long as I have a good camera person and good sound equipment, everything else will fall into place, and what will happen. And um, now that I'm a little more experienced with that, I think I wouldn't be as nervous. Um, but yeah, I mean, I was really, really lucky with having wonderful colleagues and crews. I mean, I brought an American camera person with me for the France shoot, and then in Vietnam, I was able to connect with an American cameraman who was living in Saigon, and we put together a Vietnamese crew. So I see filmmaking as an extremely collaborative thing. I never wanted to make this film by myself. I never wanted to um, take all the glory. I wanted it to be a collaborative effort. And so I really cherish and always did cherish all the work um, that I did with my crews and with editors. And we had a couple wonderful editors. So yeah.
So, Peter, it is a collaborative, team effort to make a film, but you are the director, and you also made the choice, which many filmmakers do, to be in the movie. Some take that hard line approach to not do that, but
Yeah.
why, in this particular case, was it an important decision for you to be in the film?
Yes, well, that's a good question. I started out behind the camera with my first couple shoots, and I realized, that that wasn't going to work very well because I was sort of like the instigating force behind the film. Like
Hmm.
nobody else had the energy or the drive or the passion or the curiosity to make this film other than me. So, a combination of the fact that I didn't want to be behind the camera and that I knew that I had to tell my story as well as other people's stories encouraged me to start asking friends to volunteer to be behind the camera. And then after that point, I started hiring professional camera people, and it just happened naturally and organically. One of my advisors, who I loved, um, watched a short version of the film, and he gave me this feedback. He said, "Peter, your film is very interesting. It's going to be really good." He said, "But don't take this the wrong way. Just remember, you're not that interesting." And I laughed when he said that, and I thanked him for it. I said, "Yeah, I know I'm not that interesting." So, I think that it takes a special skill to be able to say, like, yeah, here's me. Don't really focus on me, but like these are the things that I discovered. But in the editing process, my editors were like, "Well, we want to know about more about you." I mean, the scenes about me growing up or me as a teenager, I had initially no interest in putting those in the film, but it was really my editors that said, like, yeah, but we're missing this. We need this context. And that's another example of collaborative art making. Like, even though I didn't think my own story was necessary, they did. And so we put it in.
It's a weird thing, like in hip hop music, if an artist uses their name like
Yeah.
in their lyrics,
Yeah.
it just makes the fans like more curious, about
Uh-huh.
those people. And I think sometimes in filmmaking, some people like it, some people don't. When you put yourself in the film, it makes you a little bit more of a celebrity. But I felt like this was a very good choice, and your voice was needed for this story, and it becomes your journey. And obviously, one learns about the connections between yourself, your personal story, and your brothers throughout the film. Um, you mentioned earlier that this film could be challenging to make because you delve into topics like sexuality and drug use. And I was wondering, how tough was it for you to get your family on board to participate in this documentary when for so many years no one was really talking about it, as you said?
Yeah, I mean, at first I got some resistance from my siblings, and they would say things like, "Well, it's just too sad, and why bring this up?" And but then, as time went on, all of my siblings essentially asked to be part of the film. They asked to be interviewed, which I was very touched. And my mother never hesitated to be interviewed. And I think, in a way, I mean, we must have done 10 interviews with my mom. And in a way, I think that they were kind of therapy sessions. Once the film was finished, I decided to interview her again just about her life in general and not about Jimmy, but just about life, her life. And I did basically a whole day of filming of my mom, and she told me about her life, and she got emotional at times. She was crying, and then the next morning she said, "I don't understand why, but I slept so well last night." And I said, "Well, I understand why, because people hide, they keep a lot within themselves, and so you know." I think it's a, I think I may have said this in another interview, but I think it's like with death, you want to, I don't want to say you still want to savor it, but you want to you want to explore all those emotions. You want to explore your grief and your trauma, but you also have to balance that with moving on. And this is something that I really loved about Vietnamese culture and the country of Vietnam is that they've been through so much. They spent most of the 20th century at war, and yet they moved on, So this is kind of like how I view maybe what a family should try to do is like jump deep, dive deep into that grief, but then move on.
I was always amazed that there are countries that, let's say, America has been at war with in the past, and it was just brutal. And so many people died, so many lives were destroyed. And yet, within a lifetime, they can become trading partners or allies.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it just, I just am blown away by that. I mean,
yeah.
what was it like to go to Vietnam? I mean, that's just what it seems like on the surface, but are they open to Americans today visiting, in your experience? And
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's like I think it's almost like a footnote at this point for young people. There's so many young people in Vietnam. I think that the population really exploded, in the last 20, 30 years. And those people have no problem with Americans. I think that I speak fluent French. I was a French major in college, and I was didn't know how much or little anyone would speak French in Vietnam, but people who are like over 70 years old tend to still speak French in Vietnam, which I also thought was very touching. I met a few older people that I was able to speak in French with. That was a great experience. But no, I found it to be a very open, welcoming culture. It's also a very entrepreneurial culture. Like everywhere you go in Vietnam, there's a business. There's like, a restaurant or a little shack that's selling a certain kind of food or clothes or shoes or you name it. So it's a very vibrant place.
so, as you were saying, I mean, one of the things that your film teaches us is that families can move on with the grieving process, and countries can as well on a larger
Yeah.
scale. That's pretty cool. Um, when you look back at making this film, we should talk about your brother a little bit. What was the most important thing that you wanted viewers to take away in terms of what you learned about your brother?
Um, I think that he was not perfect, that he was a three-dimensional person, flaws, warts and all, as they say. Like he was I think we grew up with this sort of hero worship of him in my family, and I don't think that's healthy for anybody. I think people need to be allowed to be messy in some ways, and his life was very messy, especially towards the end with drug use and secrets and various things. And so I think that my message is to for one thing, to savor life while the person's alive. don't focus on the tragedy, but focus on the life, and realize that we're all human and everybody has um, their light side and their dark side. Um, but you know, I think um, his legacy is something that I'm interested in promoting, but also the legacy of some other people in the film that have passed away. So that's been one of the things that I've wanted to share with the world is like, this was a life, and this is a life I want to tell you about.
And as we said earlier, the film touches on a lot of universal themes. And one of the things that it makes you reflect on quite a bit, it's very philosophical, um, is the topic of memory. Um, Memory is really, something that, everyone has, but you explore the different ways in which people choose to remember certain things, try to forget other things. What did you
Hmm.
learn about memory in making this film?
Hmm. That's a good question. I would say I definitely learned, and I've heard this before, but history is not fact. I mean, a fact is just someone's memory of it, essentially. I mean, things get written down, but like everybody remembers things differently. And my uncle went to Vietnam to pick up, to identify the body of my brother. And when I interviewed my mom about that, she said different things than what he said. Like they both had their own take on that experience. So I think the truth lies somewhere between various people's memories, as you say. And um, so, you know, when people say, "Did you find the answer to your questions?" I say, like, "Yeah, I did, reasonably enough." I mean, there's always gray area. You're never going to totally know, but um, yeah, and also I guess I want to say one more thing, which is that I realize that documentary filmmaking is not only about putting together a film, but it's also a way of life because just like my mother, I love saving old letters and old photos because I think this is what we have. This is our history, and this is how we look back at our family and how we look back at our heritage. So I'm really grateful to my mom and my family for saving all the stuff that could have been tossed.
Well,
And
Peter,
I
I
encourage
love this
people not
movie.
not to toss things.
Yeah, I love this movie, and I love the soundtrack too. Where
Thank
can
you.
people go to learn more about your film, your work, and also the soundtrack?
Yeah, well, thank you. The soundtrack is going to be out very shortly. I believe we're hoping it'll be, um, uh, well, it'll be very soon. And you can go to jimmyinsaigon.com, which is our website, and Jimmy in Saigon on Instagram. That's JIMMYINSAIGON. We'll be posting just as soon as the soundtrack is ready, and there's everything about the film there. The soundtrack will be on all the places that people listen to music. Apple Music, Spotify, etc. And right now there's one track that's already released, which is the Let the Sunshine In, performed by Sabina Shuba, and her last name is spelled Ciubba. So that track can be played right now, and then the rest of the film will be out very shortly.
Peter, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you.